What's happening, guys? Welcome back to the channel where for today's video we're going to be checking out some of the original 2012 Transformers Prime Robots in Disguise figures. Now, I am a massive Transformers Prime fan, but for the longest time my collection has been solely limited to some of those amazing first edition figures. Even by today's standards, I think they are by far some of the best Transformers Hasbro have ever made, but as a consequence of that, I pretty much missed out on the entirety of the Transformers Prime mainline, which definitely had a much wider character selection when compared to Transformers Prime First Edition. So, much like you guys may have seen from some of my live action movie and Transformers animated hauls, as a mission for this year, I have tried my hardest to go back and track down as many of those older releases as possible, and for today's video I thought it would be cool really and truly just to go through some of them. So let's get these newbies out of the way and check out some of the oldies. And starting off, what mainline would be complete without a brand new deluxe class Bumblebee? Now, we are kind of starting off on a weak note because let's all face it, this figure by no means stacks up in comparison to the amazing first edition Bumblebee. But with that being said, it's definitely not a bad figure, but there are quite a few odd design choices here. So first of all, I have no idea why originally Hasbro thought it would be a good idea to leave this massive plank just hanging off the back of Bumblebee's head. This looks super ugly, really lazy from an engineering perspective, and it was such an easy and simple fix. They easily could have given us a hinge joint to swivel this piece around so that it could have rested on the back of the backpack. But with that being said, the robot mode isn't terrible. The car mode, however, I think is fantastic. May even be better looking than the first edition version, and the transformation for this guy is an absolute breeze. Definitely a lot more enjoyable when compared to that first edition release, and he has this super awesome automorph gimmick. But I'm going to be honest, guys, had this not come as part of a job lot, then I more than likely would have never picked this up, because I really do think the first edition is superior in about every single way. But then on the flip side to that, here we have the regular mainline version of Cliffjumper. Now, for the longest time, I have been of the opinion that the first edition Cliffjumper is by far the most accurate transforming version of that character we've ever seen. But after picking this guy up, honestly, I'm not too sure. I really like this deluxe Cliffjumper. The only thing which I think is super ugly about it would be the lanky ass arms. Had they found a better way to have engineered these, then without a doubt, this definitely would have been the best Cliffjumper, because the chest, despite it using fake pieces, I think is way more accurate to the series. The leg design too is awesome, especially the shape of the feet, and it is actually just quite a fun figure to flip back and forth from robot and vehicle mode. Vehicle mode I think is brilliant with the exception of the clear plastic. It would have looked way better had they decided to have gone with a darker tint, but much like Bumblebee, this guy has a super awesome automorph gimmick. These figures back in the day were just built differently. I mean, check out that kind of cog mechanism that you can see behind the back of the head. That is so awesome, and the articulation on this one too is definitely better than the first edition release. This comes packed with an actual waist joint, which you don't need to mistransform him in order to get access to. So yeah, surprisingly, I'm not quite sure whether or not that first edition release is indeed the best version of Cliffjumper. You guys let me know what your thoughts are down below. Now, next up, make it double and call it trouble. Now, I know technically these are not a part of the Transformers Prime mainline, but they were a part of a job lot, so I thought I would just showcase them in today's video anyway. And these were two repaints which up until a few weeks ago, I had no idea even existed. So these are Skywarp and Thundercracker recolors of the original first edition Starscream, and they are actually banging. These are two brilliant looking repaints. I believe they were Takara exclusives, and there are some brand new components, so as we check him out from the back, both of them do include these additional missiles, which I believe are permanently attached to the wings. I've tried my best to remove them, but they don't seem to want to budge at all. Both of them have terrific looking jet modes, and being paired alongside the original Starscream make for such an awesome display. It really was such a shame that we never saw more Seekers in the Transformers Prime TV show, as had we had all three of these on screen, I think it would have been absolutely incredible. Now, this next one is a character which I have been after for years, kind of a conceptualized design for Transformers Prime. Here we have Rumble, so one of Soundwave's minions, although a brand new take on the character and definitely a welcome addition to the collection. This is Rumble like we have never before seen him. He does not transform into a cassette or kind of a minion for Soundwave. He transforms into his own independent sports car, which I think is a really refreshed take on the character, and the robot mode design is awesome. I mean, check out that that chest. It looks like he has a pair of eyes in addition to the actual head sculpt, which has some banging light piping. I also like how they did for the most part stick quite faithfully to the original design of Rumble, at least where the robot mode was concerned. So he does come packed with 2 pile drivers, which if you flip them upwards can double as a pair of machine guns, which are super awesome. And he is blue, which is the animation accurate color for the original G1 Rumble. So definitely a really brilliant figure and by far one of the standouts from the RID mainline. And then next up, following on from the trend set by Rumble, we have another conceptualized character, that being Sergeant Kup. Now, with all of these conceptualized designs and these actually having proper CG renders, it is making me wonder that if we ever had seen Transformers Prime Season 4, that maybe some of these characters would have showed up. But this is a really cool retake on the character. It was a pre-paint in the making, and I will show you guys the repaint this becomes in just a second. But as we check out the details, brilliant looking head sculpt. I love the chest design. He does include 2 movieverse Ironhide style cannons, which can be attached onto the side, so this may be giving you guys kind of a hint as to what the repaint was, but look at the details. It's just a really well made looking figure, although much like that Bumblebee had a really weird design choice, that being that this piece originally just kind of stuck out the back of his head. The only way to compress it against the backpack was to pop it off, flip it around, snap it back into place, which really and truly was parts forming. Again, no idea why they never added an additional hinge joint, but he does transform into a pretty awesome pickup truck. But this guy from the get-go was really just foreshadowing the inevitable Ironhide repaint. Now, without a doubt, this mold suits Ironhide down to a T, although I do believe this was a Takara Optimus only release, so kind of sucked for those that couldn't pick up any of the imports, but a really awesome repaint. Now, what I personally like to do is nick those arm cannons from Kup and slap them onto this Ironhide, as I really think it just completes his look. And in some ways, some of those Transformers Prime characters did have traits borrowed from the live action movie counterparts, so to see those arm cannons included with Kup and really and truly being intended for Ironhide, I thought was a great throwback. But this is such a brilliant looking repaint. I mean, check out the windshield, look at all of the details that we have packed inside. Just a really well done mainline deluxe, but unfortunately, much like Kup, also suffered from kind of designer laziness, in the sense that again, you had to pop this piece off, flip it around and attach it onto the back if you didn't want it sticking out of the back part of his head. But brilliant pickup truck, and you could attach those arm cannons onto the back to kind of create this turret mode, which really did look awesome. Now we jump over to some of the Voyagers, and this is a figure which really, after the release of the Legacy version, I never thought I would need in the collection, but I'm so glad to have it. This is a redeco of the original Dreadwing into Skyquake. Now here in the UK, this thing originally was pretty much impossible to track down, which is why for the longest time I've always owned Dreadwing and never Skyquake, but this is a really banging repaint and such an accurate recreation of the original character design. The jet mode for Skyquake though, I don't think was too great. The hands of the bot mode really just kind of hangs out at the back, and scale wise he was a lot smaller than he needed to be, so those are 2 areas where I really think the new Legacy Evolution version is the superior release. And then last, but by no means least, we have the Robots in Disguise mold for Transformers Prime Optimus Prime. Now this specific version is the Takara Optimus recolor, so he is a little more closer to how he actually appeared in the TV show. I believe the original retail version had transparent blue forearms, which to be honest really did look kind of ugly. But do you know what, this actually isn't a terrible figure. For the longest time I have kind of been avoiding it because I've always been of the opinion that the first edition is superior, and whilst I still definitely think that, this isn't a bad pickup at all. You know, when compared to some of the other first edition versus their mainline counterparts, Optimus Prime I actually think is one of the better ones. The head sculpt is brilliant, the details that we have for the windshield I think is awesome, and he never used any fake pieces, unlike the first edition Optimus Prime. So in some ways, from an engineering perspective, that's kind of impressive. But I'm not quite sure why both the Takara version and the regular mainline release thought it would be a good idea to cast the forearms and the elbow joint out of transparent plastic. I mean, that is a QC nightmare waiting to happen. Even the backpack for this figure I think compressed quite nicely, definitely did match what we saw in the TV show. And the truck mode for this Optimus Prime, to be honest, I think is pretty much flawless. It's a really solid truck mode to accompany a pretty decent robot mode. The only real area where I thought this guy was a huge downgrade when compared to the first edition edition release would be in terms of weaponry. He included none of the energon blades nor ion blasters that this guy had in the show, so that kind of sucked. But if you weren't able to track down the first edition Prime, then do you know what? This actually wasn't a bad substitute at all. And that's a wrap on some of the Transformers Prime figures that I was able to track down this year. So definitely am quite happy with some of these pickups. I know some of the characters are just redos of what we already saw in the first edition line, but their molds and their engineering have always kind of appealed to me, which really is the main reason why I picked up the likes of the Cliffjumper and the Optimus Prime. But I would love to get your thoughts down in the comment section below. What did you guys think of the original Transformers Prime mainline? I want to thank you all so much for watching, and until my next video, transform and roll out!